Yo, fam, Coach Sam, Strong Gents Coaching here with Coach Tom for another podcast episode. Strong Gents Coaching is where we help men get stronger physically, mentally, and socioeconomically in life. Today, we're going to be talking all things marijuana, weed, the devil's lettuce, Mary Jane, because in New Jersey, tomorrow is going to be legalized in the state of New Jersey. So we want to get some information out on marijuana. Tom is the guy to do that. Coach Tom, how long have you been a drug and alcohol substance abuse counselor?
Wow. Well, first, I just want to say that it is legal in New Jersey, but it's going to be available for sale for the first time tomorrow, April 21st. It was legalized by vote in November 2020, but these things take a very long time to roll out. So the state, has decided to because it's been a long time, to allow a legal sale to occur in the medical marijuana facilities in the state that already exist. So there's 8 or 9 of those in the state. So it's going to be available for sale at those facilities starting tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, I got my first job as a drug counselor. I think it was in 1988 in Asbury Park, working with people with heroin addiction in a methadone maintenance, facility or treatment facility in Asbury Park. And, it's funny because, heroin would be seen as, to a lot of people, the very direct opposite of marijuana. We see heroin as a very dangerous drug, and it is. But because marijuana is a lot different than heroin, for example, you're not going to OD on marijuana. Okay. It's impossible unless you eat too much of it, and then you could possibly OD, but nobody would do that. But you can OD on heroin, obviously, but you can't OD on marijuana. So automatically, how people think, they're like, well, then, it's safe. There's no harm to it. Now, obviously, marijuana is not heroin. Those are two different types of drugs, and they both bring, certain things to the table. But just because you're not going to die, from an overdose from doing marijuana, doesn't mean that doing too much marijuana cannot greatly interfere in your life, because it can. And that's kind of, over the years, over the decades, I've heard it all. I've heard so many things I've heard so many things from people, who use marijuana. And I'll tell you a real funny one. Okay. That one of the first experiences was even before I was a drug counselor. I was a probation officer for 1 year. I was a young guy, 25 years old. And I was a probation officer. And there was this dude on probation, for marijuana possession. Okay. And he was in a band at the time, a very popular Shore band, very popular. They played Led Zeppelin music. It was awesome. They were great. So anyway, this dude was on probation for what they called a conditional discharge, meaning that at the time it was a small amount of marijuana. As long as he did his probation and there were no issues or arrests, then he would be discharged from that on his record. So anyway, he wasn't my probationer. I was covering for somebody because someone was absent for a very long time on medical leave. So it was someone else's probationer. So I had to talk to him. So he was due for a drug test, and he was new on probation. And, that's part of probation. Like, you have to, it doesn't matter what your offense is, you get drug tested. Okay. At least that's what it was like back in the day. So he hadn't been drug tested yet, and it was time for him to be drug tested. So I brought it up to him. I'm like, listen, dude, so you got to be drug tested. And his face dropped. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, you're on probation. Like, you got to be drug tested. Look, it says right here. He goes, man, he goes, I didn't know that. I'm like, and I'm like, yeah, man. I'm like, it's part of it. Why is there going to be a problem? Are you going to test positive or something? He looks at me, he goes, I'm a musician, man.
That's actually really funny.
And I'm like, I looked at him, I'm like, yeah. He goes, I'm a musician, man. Of course I'm going to be positive.
That's actually really fun.
I said, listen, man, I said, okay, like, all right, well, it's going to be one positive, but you're going to have to work this out. He goes, I don't know how this is going to work. He goes, I just can't stop using. I'm like, you're going to have to, man. Like, you got caught, you got caught. You're on probation now. So yeah, you're going to have to give a negative here at some point, and see, that's the truth of the matter. So that's how my career started. And, he kind of just didn't see it as a big deal. And you know what, to a lot of people, I understand it's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? And if that was today, that gentleman would not have been arrested, so we've come a long way.
Well,
But
let's keep that point going, because he had a hard time just giving it up, right? He had to do probation.
Oh yeah.
Like you said, it's not a serious drug where, a lot of people feel like they don't get addicted to marijuana. That's a big thing you hear all the time. Like, oh, I'm not addicted to it. But someone like him, for an example, like someone like him, he may have been slightly addicted to it if he couldn't give it up, or he could just been straight up addicted to it if he couldn't give it up. So I hear that argument a lot, just in conversation. People say, oh, you can't get addicted to marijuana. I can't get addicted to marijuana. It's just, I like doing it. So can you address that really quick? Why is it so easy for people to fall into marijuana? And then why is it hard for them to get out when supposedly it's not that addicting?
Well, very good questions. And first, I'm going to say that I'm not a marijuana basher. You know what I mean? So I'm not anti-drug, anti-marijuana. I have some issues with the legalization, but that's only because of it increases availability to young kids. Now someone could say, well, they could get it if they want. I'm like, yeah, you're right, they could, but they'd really have to look for it. But now it could be in all their friends' houses, like easy access, right? So it just exposes kids at younger ages to it, who maybe not would have been exposed, right? But anyway, so I just wanted to get that out there to say, oh, this is a podcast, this is an anti-drug guy. No, I'm a drug counselor. And, if people use drugs and it doesn't cause a problem for them, then God bless them. Like, I don't get on my pulpit. That's not my business, But in regards to marijuana, okay, marijuana way back in the day in the 60s and 70s, like, it was a much weaker form of marijuana. The drug in marijuana is a very long, drug name, but, shortened, is called THC. A lot of people generally know that. That's the psychoactive drug in marijuana, THC. That's what gets somebody high. So back in the day, like back in the 60s, 70s, there wasn't, the content of THC in marijuana wasn't as high. But, as we've gone on the decades, it's become much higher. So the higher it comes, the more likely that someone's going to become more dependent on it. It was very unlikely in the past for someone to become physically addicted to it. Mostly it would be a psychological or a mental type of addiction. So back in the day, you would really have to use every day, multiple times a day for months and months and months to get physically addicted to it. And even then, people would deny that they were physically addicted because they associate physical drug addiction with a heroin withdrawal, throwing up, having diarrhea, having the shivers. Yeah, it's not like that. So, when you're withdrawing from marijuana, it's kind of similar to nicotine. Okay, there's two major symptoms that you get: high anxiety and insomnia. Those are the two things, that people generally get if they really are getting physically dependent and now they want to stop using marijuana. But it's a totally different ball game now in 2022. Totally different. Why do I say that? Vaping devices. Vaping devices are, man, I tell you what, they're terrible. They're able to deliver, very quickly, a high content, of THC, and people become addicted very quickly to it, and vape pens whack you out, and true marijuana smokers will tell you this, that there's a big difference between a vape pen and the traditional way of getting high in marijuana. Yeah. So now it's such an issue because this is one of the problems with marijuana, right, Sam? Marijuana is an all-the-time drug. Alcohol's not an all-the-time drug, most drugs are not an all-the-time drug. What do I mean by that? Marijuana is a 24/7 drug. You can do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Okay. People don't drink alcohol at 8 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't happen. Maybe a true alcoholic who's addicted has to drink in the morning to ward off withdrawal symptoms. Yeah, that's not everybody. That's a small percentage. So, I bet none of your friends wake up and say, hey, I'm going to have a beer at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay. No.
Depends if it's tea time on golf. Depends.
Yeah, but that's
No, I'm messing her. No, of course not. No. Yes.
But on a regular basis, wake and bake. Wake and bake, okay, is a saying because so many people do it. Marijuana is a drug that you can tolerate all the time. So people like how that feels. So they get led down this road, okay, of using it too often, okay? And then they become used to it. Their brain starts to change. They expect it. Now they do what we call self-medication, okay? They use it to medicate certain ills. So what is the number one ill that marijuana users use, okay, to self-medicate? It's boredom.
Anxiety too, right?
It's boredom. That's number one. Okay. 2 is sleep, boredom and sleep. Okay. So now they get caught into this trap where, wow, I'm really bored. I can't tolerate boredom.
But hold on. But your point was, why do they do it? Because they're bored and to go to sleep?
Well, I'm saying that if someone has started to use for self-medication purposes, okay, not just to get high, but for other reasons, they're using themselves. So a self-medication reason, the number one, like someone would say stress. I asked them, I'm like, why do you self-medicate marijuana? Why does someone who's using marijuana self-medicate them? Oh, because of stress. I'm like, no. Can they? Yes. What's the number one reason? Boredom.
So, okay. So I was going to say, you were saying number one thing, and what pops in my head is everybody says anxiety. Oh, I smoke weed because of anxiety, right? So when someone says, they're smoking weed all the time because they're anxious, right? What do you think, or what would you recommend for someone? Like, what is the root cause of that, right? Is it actually anxiety? Should they go see somebody and maybe see if they do have anxiety? Do you think do you think that's just an excuse to smoke more marijuana?
There's a couple of things here, right? So first,
does it also does it help with anxiety, or can it make anxiety worse? What's the
all of the above? Okay, but here's the thing: it's a slippery slope. So everybody knows what I mean when I say that. Okay, if you choose to use marijuana to help with anxiety, that's a slippery slope. It may lead you, okay, to a place you don't want to go. So let me first say that the state. Let's talk about medical marijuana. The state of New Jersey, I'll just talk about them. When medical marijuana was approved, they initially came out with certain illnesses that it was approved for. That's it. You just couldn't say, hey, yeah, I got aches and pains from marijuana. Like, couldn't say that in the beginning. Then they added anxiety, which I didn't agree to. Okay, because marijuana in and of itself, okay, I don't know if you know anybody personally, but marijuana can make people anxious. Okay, I have a close friend of mine that gave up marijuana, okay, because of that very reason, was having panic attacks when he used it, right? And he didn't go ahead.
I think I've had 50-50 with everybody I talk to. Some people say it makes them more anxious and paranoid. And then some people tells them it makes it less anxious, more relaxed. But I really think what it might do is, like alcohol does to a certain extent, is just exacerbate someone's personality. So if you're already an anxious person and taking marijuana may cause you to be more anxious, it could reduce your anxiety, but maybe it exacerbates somebody's personality, kind of like alcohol does. It kind of breaks your shell down, lets you be a little bit more social, exacerbates who you want to be, kind of. So I think you have to, if you're someone who smokes weed and you're getting anxious, you may be an anxious person. It may be exacerbating your anxiety. Do you see that? Does that happen at times?
Yeah, it happens because people don't understand what a therapeutic dose is, and this is what the slippery slope is.
Yeah,
people like the feeling of marijuana. Okay, so there's a gray area. How much do I use to help with my anxiety, and did I use too much? Okay, so what happens is people on this slippery slope, if they're using marijuana to help with their anxiety, a lot of them end up using too much marijuana. So if you use too much marijuana, that overall makes you more anxious. So if you overall are more anxious, now what do you want to do? I want to smoke more marijuana. So so you get into this vicious cycle. And the reason is, Sam, therapeutic dose. Someone who's using marijuana therapeutically should not be high. Okay. Like if you are really high, if you're whacked like Spicoli, okay, then, then you missed the boat. You're not using for your affliction. You're just being a pothead. Okay.
It
Like
makes sense. And
that's important. That's important.
a lot of people do that. They just get completely zooted out of their brain and think that they're reducing their anxiety or whatever the case may
Yeah,
be.
they missed the boat. There's a therapeutic way to use it. And that's the trick. If I like marijuana, am I able to use it at times? Like if I'm anxious and I want marijuana to help me, can I only use a little bit and stop so it helps my anxiety? Or I'm like, oh man, I got the taste, like, yeah, let's
Yeah,
go.
no, and what you said before is you could smoke it all day long. So it's hard. I think it's it's difficult, right? It's difficult to establish that what is the good amount for you. And I think a lot of times people overdo it in the beginning. A lot of people don't like to take small things. It's like, if I'm in kind of thing. It's not like if I'm in a little bit. So I think that's a challenging aspect, but it is true that a therapeutic dose can help in some, instances for some things. Like, for example, Parkinson's disease, putting someone on marijuana for Parkinson's seems to lower that tremor and let them live a more functional life. But maybe if you just totally gas them out with it, it would make things, it would make them worse. I mean, I don't know, because I've never seen that happen.
Here's the issue with marijuana. Like, listen, I listen to people. If they feel marijuana helps their pain or whatever, fine. But it's important to know there's no research with that. So there's no research that says, marijuana helps this particular affliction. You know what I mean? So now
I guess anecdotal research.
What's that?
Anecdotal. There's a ton of anecdotal research out there. So, for example, personal trainer for 10 years, train a lot of clients. The amount of clients who I've trained who have smoked marijuana it's got to be 70%, right?
Yeah.
And so I've trained a lot of older clients, in their 70s, 80s, late 60s. And these are some really successful people, live really great lives, very healthy individuals. And they've smoked weed every day since they were 13 years old. Some of them, not everybody, some of them. But all of them had this one thing in common, is that they used it more so as a medicinal dose, right? So I have one client who runs a few $100 million company, right? And he smokes marijuana every night. Every night. He refuses to do it in the morning. He refuses to do it at work. He refuses to doing it during the week if he's busy, but he does it at night and sometimes recreational on the weekend. And he has no issue with it. He doesn't do it for anxiety or anything like that. It's just his nightly routine. And I think there are a lot of people similar to him out there, but I think there's more people out there who are abusing it than there are using it to their benefit. But I do think marijuana does pose some positives for some people to live a more functional life. I just think a big problem is what you're saying, is that dose, especially with these vapes, like you were saying, it's just an endless dose of marijuana.
It's crazy. But this is what I'll say generally, okay? It's not so much, it is and it isn't, but it's not so much the drug. When you look at it, like your client, okay, you look at his life, does marijuana interfere with his life? And if you're looking honestly, it doesn't, right? So that's really the formula. And that's what's hard to get some people to see. It's like, okay, let's look at your marijuana use. You're using it every day, several times a day. Let's see if it's interfering in your life. And if it is, then, maybe it's an issue for you. So it's an honest conversation. And you know what? You apply that formula to every drug, to alcohol, to pills, to everything. Marijuana, I always tell people all the time, marijuana is not in this special little protective box that drug issues don't apply to it. A lot of people think that it doesn't apply.
Well, even you're right. I mean, like, think about even like something as simple, it's not even a drug, but video games, right? Like, I think any type of habitual addiction, right? Have similar factors to it, just like marijuana does. And I think a big problem for people is because marijuana is a drug, and you can, rebuttal me on this, but I think it's pretty solid, is that is because it's not a serious drug in terms of, getting you completely out of your consciousness and, ruining your life. I think people smoke it because it does alter reality slightly. It does, change the way your brain is working. And some people don't like themselves. And I think they fall into this habit where they use marijuana. They felt a little bit better. Maybe maybe they're someone who reduced their anxiety quotation or their boredom, and they become mentally a different person in some aspect, not fully, but some aspects. Their consciousness has changed, and they become to rely on that because they don't really necessarily like living without it, right? But some people, I feel like, use that as a crutch to get along in life. Now, you can tell me if you think that's right or wrong, but I think I see it in a lot of people that I come across.
I think a lot of people just don't they don't see how much it is affecting them, or they don't want to see it. I call marijuana the Trojan horse of drugs. Okay, so if you're familiar with the Trojan horse story, okay, of Troy, okay, where I forget who did what, but anyway, one army gave the other army this big horse as a gift, and they're like, hey, this is a gift, this is awesome, but there was an army hiding inside. And as soon as their defenses were low and they're like, oh, there's not going to be any fight, they gave us a gift, then the army burst out of the horse and killed them all. Okay, so that's what marijuana is. It's a Trojan horse. You think it's a gift, okay, and it's like, hey, I can use this whenever I want. It's not going to affect me. I'm not addicted to it. I get up the next day and I don't have to do it if I don't want to. And generally people are they're right when they say that. So I can use it every day. It's not a problem. But you know what? There is an army inside, and that's what people don't get. And some people, Sam, it takes a lot of work. They might end up in therapy with me, but they still don't see it as an issue. And I always tell them, I'm like, listen, I said, I've learned how to do this over the years with marijuana users, because they are very defensive in regard to protecting that drug, because it's not like alcohol. You're not going to go out and kill yourself tonight using marijuana, and it's not highly addicted. Vapes aside, they are highly addicted, but non-vape marijuana is not highly addicted, right? So I always say, I start off with this. I said, I'm a firm believer that too much of anything in this life can be a bad thing, can affect your life. Too much of anything can affect your life. So let's have that conversation. So too much alcohol can affect your life, too much spending, too much eating, right? Too much gambling, right? Too much working out sometimes can affect your life. Okay. Like, I've counseled triathletes who had really terrible injuries and were getting divorced because, they were quite frankly, they were addicted to that whole way of living. So I start off there and I try to have that conversation. You know what? And it works. It's helpful. It's a helpful conversation, because I'm not looking to say, hey, marijuana is bad, bad devil. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, like, dude, like, are you happy with your life? Like, you're using this all the time. Like, you're not yourself. Like, look at your goals. Like, you can never seem to get to your goals. Like, you always give up before you get there. Or look at the health you're in. You're not in good health. You know what I mean? I try to get them there.
It's yeah, I know that everything you just said is completely accurate, because it applies to other things besides marijuana. It applies to other things as well. Like, for example, when someone comes in to see me for the first time in personal training setting, I usually get all the time, and it is so annoying, but it is what it is with the social media world. People will come in with their phones on and they're like, this person on Instagram is telling me this, this, and this, and this. And like, can I get this? Yeah, right. And they're like, can I get this body? Should I do this? Blah, blah, blah. And they tell me everything that they're doing. Right. And I just sit there and I listen. I quietly listen. And at the end of their rant, what I ask is one question. Okay, how is that working out for you? And they sink in their chair. I say the same question every single time, because they're sitting in my chair for a reason, because everything they have tried or are doing is not working. Okay. And they don't see it yet. They are telling me what they're doing and that it's right. Most of the time they're like, yeah, I'm doing, like, for example, I'm doing the ketogenic diet and like all this stuff. And this person's telling me this, this, and this. How is that working for you? Right? How is it working for you? And most of the time they're like, oh shit, it's not. I'm like, okay, so let's try something else. And I think it's similar to the marijuana setting, where it's like you're just smoking joints left and right. You're just smoking doobies and getting high on the couch and like, oh shit, I'm a little late for work, or like you forgot to call someone back, or you're just being late. You're not taking responsibilities, but you don't think it's a problem. But hey, how about we look from the outside in and say, hey, how's this working out for you? And it might not be the marijuana, but by addressing one thing, we could start to talk about the things that surround that. And it's like, oh, you're smoking marijuana to avoid your responsibilities because you don't want to do the responsibilities. So it might not be the marijuana, the responsibilities that you're avoiding. So I think a lot of people need to ask the question, how is this working for me?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to get people thinking, I'm like, like people who use every day. Like, I'm like, you use every single day. You ever take a break? No. I'm like, you put a drug in your body every single day. You never take a break. No. I said, can you see yourself drinking alcohol every day? They're like, why would I ever do that? I'm like, it's another drug. I mean, no. And I'm like, listen, they're like, I could never do that. I'm like, okay, stay with that thought. I want you to think about this. If the thought of drinking alcohol every day, okay, is something that you can't even envision, why is it so easy for you to envision getting high every day? Because they're in the same ballpark. They're different, I'll grant you that, but they're both mood altering substances. So you were telling me, wow, I would never do that mood altering substance every day, but this one I will. You know what I mean? And so I try to get that conversation going, because that's a common sense conversation, and they have learned to really minimize, okay, the effects that marijuana may be, too much marijuana now. I want to say that too much marijuana may be having on their life. My whole goal for people, when they come to me is that, listen, like I just said before, too much of anything is not a bad thing. So, how about cutting it back so we get it to where it's social? Because this is the fact, Sam. If you're using marijuana every day, you're not doing it with someone else. Okay, that's called self-medicating. You are using on your own, and that's a space where I don't think people want to be. So I try to say, listen, why don't you try to get it back to where it's more like a social thing, like on the weekends, like with your friends. Try to get away from. I say there's two roads with marijuana. There's the social road and there's the self-medication road. And if you're on that self-medication road where you're a daily user now and you use it for specific reasons, okay, that's, to me, that's a dangerous road, because then it's really hard to break that. It's hard to get off that road,
To keep that kind of line of thought going is, for example, for me, I don't like when things can control me, right? I don't like that feeling. I like when I have control over things. Now, you don't have control over 99% of things in life. It's a very small percentage of things that you have control over. And I'll say it all the time. I believe you have control over your body. So how much you move and what you do with it. You have control over the foods you eat. So what you eat, when you eat, how much you eat it. And you got control most of the time of your attitude. So how you address the things that you do in your life. So those three things are the main thing. Everything else, you just try and keep it together, right? But what you do control also is the substances that you use. And I have come across some things in life where they have started to control me. And I didn't notice it at first, right? It took a while to notice that, oh, you know what? I'm doing this at this time, so I have enough time to do this, right? And I think that is when it becomes a problem, because people don't think marijuana is controlling their life or whatever the case may be. We're just talking about that for now, for this podcast, but it could be controlling your life if you start altering your schedule to do it, or you don't do it around other people because you don't like what they think. So then you open your schedule up so you can get it in before you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned that, because if marijuana, everyone's kind of familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, right? 12-step self-help group where alcoholics go and, kind of, it's group support. They follow steps and, and they support each other to stay sober. Well, there are a lot of offshoots from that, because it's very successful, a self-help program that was started in the 1930s by two gentlemen. And so Marijuana's Anonymous exists. And it was founded in the late 80s, and the very thing that you said, changing your schedule like that, okay, around your use, is one of the 12 questions that they have. When you first go into Marijuana's Anonymous, they have 12 questions for you. And they say, if you answered yes to any one of those questions, you're probably in the right place, and that was, I know that was one of them. And another, like, are a couple other ones. Are your friends determined by your marijuana use? Like, that's one on there. And do you get worried when your stash runs out? You know what I mean? And, do you get anxious about that? So there's a number, the questions are pretty good. I use them with my clients, and I'm like, just for a conversation, I'm not saying you should go on Marijuana's Anonymous or anything like that, but I'm like, listen, you might want to know if Marijuana's Anonymous people would say, yeah, you probably, you'll fit in if you come in and start talking, so.
Well, I just think it's important to ask questions in general. Like, for example, the personal training stuff, when you're going over your nutrition, you're trying to lose weight. Well, it's, okay, you eat this at night, every night. Why? What's the reason for it? How does it make you feel? And it's just important to ask these questions, because sometimes, you don't even know why you're doing it, right? You really don't. A lot of times you're like, for example, I recently had a client quit smoking cigarettes and walked in one day and he was like, I just smoked a cigarette in the car before I walked in. And I was like, why? He goes, I don't know. I'm going to quit. Right. So it's like, it was that moment where he was like, why am I smoking a cigarette before the gym? He had the conversation in his head. He's like,
my man, he's going to quit.
Yeah. So I think sometimes it's just asking like the right question or right circumstance has to pop up to notice that you're doing something for no reason. But in terms of just weed in general, what effects does it have on the brain when someone smokes, let's say higher than of self-medicate, real self-medicate?
This is kind of important, right? And this is why people want to be careful of daily use. So outside of the euphoric effects that it has, okay, marijuana, okay, is chemically similar to a neurotransmitter that we have in our brain. So most people know that neurotransmitters, okay, are chemicals that messages get sent across, okay, the synapses in your brain. So messages get sent. So, the brain is, there's only so much neurotransmitter that your brain uses to transfer messages, right? That's how it works. But if you're using too much marijuana, because it's chemically similar to this neurotransmitter, you have too much of that in your brain. So what does that do? It keeps sending the message over and over again, okay? So you over-focus on something. So if you are using too much marijuana on a daily basis, you are over-focusing. So what happens when you over-focus on things? What do you cut out when you over-focus? The big picture. You cut out the big picture. Okay, so, and you live in this very defined, narrow view of things because, whatever you're focused on at the time, you're over-focusing on it and you can't see the big picture. Now, it may be, let's just say someone's smoking a lot of marijuana and they want to lose weight and they're focusing on this diet, okay, that the big picture is, it's not going to work long term, but I'm really focused on losing the weight now. I want to lose weight now. I want to look at the scale. I want pounds dropping off. But you're like, but this is unhealthy. But they don't really see that because the big picture is not clear. They're over focusing on whatever's in front of them. And that's one of the big issues with marijuana. A lot of people don't understand when they use a lot of it.
So marijuana could actually be used as a focus enhancer.
Well, that's, it could be, but again, that's the slippery slope.
Right? So, but are you saying it could be used as a focus enhancer or more like it just creates a tunnel vision for someone who smokes too much of it?
It creates a tunnel vision, an overflow, okay, where you can't see the big picture. Okay.
You have a lot of people who would argue that I don't know about argue, but they would say from their own experience, well, I smoke weed and I just sat there and I thought about everything, right? So like, because it's common to think people go, oh, I had these crazy thoughts and then everything was so relaxed, it felt so open to the world, so when you say tunnel vision, some people are going to be like, well, what's this guy talking about? So
but the point is, and I should have said this, it's not just when you're high, okay? It's all the time because you have so much THC in your system. Okay. So, it's 24/7. If you're using all the time, a person has tendency, okay, they have too much of that neurotransmitter available and they're over focusing on stuff. Now, some people feel like marijuana helps them focus, and it probably does. Okay. So someone that has ADHD, but again, what do we get back to, Sam? The slippery slope and therapeutic dose. So what happens is that if someone's trying to use it for focusing, they end up using too much of it because they like it, and they over focus on things and they can't see the big picture, and it becomes an issue,
So because in other substances that alter the chemistry of the brain and fire similar neurotransmitters, what happens is, you stop producing those neurotransmitters as much naturally. So like, that's why when, if you're doing opiates, for example, and then you drop off, people get super depressed, right? That's a common symptom. So marijuana, people don't think it's addicting. People don't think it's super powerful of a drug. Like you said, back in the 80s, 70s, it probably wasn't that powerful. But now with, the vaping or higher doses or edibles and all the above, eating an edible, then smoking a vape for the entire night while you're on the edible, does it have the possibility, or does it in general, make you produce less neurotransmitters in the brain
Right.
when you're off of it? And
Very good.
Is that why some people try and stop, and it's similar to cigarettes where they can't stop because they need that hit of dopamine, because cigarette, whatever case may be, and then they're just left with this really low amount in the brain?
Well, cigarettes is an interesting, drug. That's rough because nicotine is the fastest drug to reach your brain, 7 seconds, and they feel like that's why nicotine is so hard. Smoking cigarettes is so hard to quit. But to your point, the neurotransmitters, the answer is yes. Okay, so any drug, including marijuana, that you use too much of on a daily basis, okay, our brain is very adaptable. If there's too much outside drugs in our brain adapts and recognizes that it doesn't have to produce the normal amount of neurotransmitters. So it's gotten used. Your brain has changed. Okay, so but if you quit something like marijuana, okay, let's say you've been a daily user for 3 years, okay, your brain stopped producing neurotransmitters at its regular level because the marijuana has taken its place. But as soon as you stop using marijuana, your brain doesn't bounce back right away. So yes, to answer your question, you're going to be more depressed and more anxious, more blah. You're just going to feel blah. You're not going to get pleasure out of anything, and you're going to be like, this sucks. So that's why people end up relapsing or going back to drugs, because their brain is not bounced back yet to normal. All right. And so what happens? You bridge the gap. A lot of people bridge the gaps with antidepressants and stuff, because antidepressants help your brain, okay, have more neurotransmitters available. And when you have more neurotransmitters available, particularly serotonin, okay, you feel better. All right. So yeah, it's not you're playing with this up and down game with your brain. You're fucking with your brain, and the brain takes time to bounce back. And that's what it's hard because we're impatient and we want to feel better now. We're in a now society,
Yeah, it's true. How long do you think it normally takes for someone to bounce back who is an aggressive marijuana user when they stop?
So
is it different for everybody?
It's going to be different, but you got to give yourself a little time. So generally I say about 2 to 3 months till you start, you're back, you're starting to get back to feeling normal. You know what I mean? It's not going to be 2 weeks. I'll tell you that. You got to give some time. You got to give some time for your brain to readapt itself and start produce those chemicals and, on a more regular basis.
So I've helped a couple people quit smoking cigarettes before. And one way that I helped them break that nagging urge is I had them go for a walk with music on every time they had an urge to smoke a cigarette. And I didn't care what time of day it was. If they were at work and they would take their normal 10-minute cigarette break, I said, just walk the other direction away from where you normally used to smoke cigarettes and just walk all the way back. And it's been successful for some of the people that I've trained, not everybody. Some people have that really powerful craving that they can't break. I mean, we see that with people who try and diet, and then they eat clean for a couple of days and they got that craving, and the Ben and Jerry's in the freezer and eat the whole freaking tub of it without even using a spoon. But what are some things that people who are heavily smoking marijuana, and like we said earlier, it's probably not ruining their lives like to a great extent. It just might be holding them back, or it could be lowering their potential, but they want to quit. What is something somebody could do to replace that feeling of I should be smoking right now, or I feel like crap, man, that joint, oh man, I just want to smoke a joint? What's something someone could do?
Well, there's a difference between someone that wants to quit totally or cut back. Most people want to cut back, and so I use some common sense with that. The first thing is that, so if you're smoking this as soon as you get up in the morning, my thing is, you want to start slow and try to put off that first use of marijuana for as long as you can. Okay. So the purpose is to, if you're getting high multiple times a day and the first time's in the morning, try to get high only once a day. Okay. And try to push that off to after 6 p.m. Okay. So, do that first. So you're still using every day, but you're only using once, right? So now when your brain has changed there and you feel comfortable with that, now it's like, okay, let's try to skip a day. Okay. Let's use every other day. Okay. And so we try to use a schedule like that, now someone that, like, I've had these situations where, a guy's it's mostly guys. I mean, not that women don't use marijuana, they do, but it seems like mostly guys that get my practice. But, a lot of people don't understand is that, you're young, and when you're young, a lot of people tend to smoke a lot more marijuana, but then generally people kind of grow out of that. And so I get a lot of guys who didn't grow out of it, and their wives are like, I've had it. No, you're not getting high every night. I'm tired of seeing you freaking, pass out on the couch. You're not helping with the kids. You're just high all the time. You got to stop it or we're done. I've had a lot of those. And so for guys like that, they're like, yeah, I got to stop it. I mean, we look at the whole person, right? Starting to feel better. Okay. They usually, I hate to say this, but people that usually are, smoking every day, they usually don't work out. They usually not watching their diet. Their sleep is really poor because it's marijuana sleep, And so that's where we start in regards to feeling better, starting to get in shape, starting to look at your diet. Okay. And trying to do some things, distractions, that'll make you feel good. Try to deal with your relapse triggers. But here's the other thing. If they feel like, wow, this is really too tough, then I will suggest that they go on to talk to their doctor about going on a short-term antidepressant, which will help them bridge the gap between this is when I stopped and this is when I'm feeling better, So
that makes sense.
You look at the whole person, you try that first. And if they're doing all those things, but they're still feeling lousy and they think they're going to use, then you might want to try the medication route, which is smart.
It makes sense. And I think a big part of people, I personally think marijuana can be used every day to a capacity and help people's lives in a certain extent in certain situations. I think marijuana is just abused because of easy access and because people think that it doesn't do anything to them, when in reality it does. I just think it's overused and overabused. But I think a lot of people can live happily ever after smoking weed, even if it's every day. But I think what most people are missing is a healthy lifestyle, because if you're not healthy in general, you're gonna feel like shit. And then you use outside resources to try and make yourself feel better. One bout, and I try and tell people this all the time, I'm like, you're feeling like crap. Like, one bout of low intensity, steady state cardio for 30 minutes is equivalent in your brain to a dose of one antidepressant medication. It may not last as long, but your brain produces almost the same amount of serotonin that it does when you take an antidepressant, when you take a 30-minute brisk walk. That is insanity. That is absolute insanity. It doesn't last as long, but if you can start making that a habit, guess what? You just took an antidepressant every day. If you went for a brisk walk every day and paired it with a weight training session, you now just released double the dopamine that you would with one 30-minute walk. Again, it's not the same as a reuptake inhibitor. It's not the same exact thing, right? The serotonin is not staying in your brain as long, but it may stay in your brain long enough for you to stave off that feeling of smoking another joint so you can smoke it at night. And along the way, you're going to get healthier, and you may not rely on these things to make you feel better, because you're changing the chemistry in your brain naturally through exercise. You get healthier, you feel better. Now you're using that drug or these other things to enhance your social life, right? So you can have more fun. Instead of it being the source of your fun, it enhances things that are fun to you because you're healthy.
Vacation road, as opposed to the social road. You know what I mean? And people they fall for this trap, of self-medicating with marijuana for sleep and stress and boredom. And, my thing is, don't use it for those things. You know what I mean? Like, try not to do that. Now, listen, if there's a guy that he smokes marijuana once a day and it's to help him get to sleep, and he's going to do that for the rest of his life, and he's got great success and there's no issues in his personal relationships, and who's to say that guy's doing something wrong, right? He's not, but he's figured it out for him, and it's not an issue for him, and again, I only deal with issues. If someone doesn't have an issue, like I don't beat my chest and say, if someone has an issue, I want to help them out, and it's, if someone's using every day, multiple times a day, and, their life is a mess, that's something that we got to discuss, for their benefit,
Yeah, it's something that's got to be addressed. But in the topic of sleep, you hear that a lot too. Marijuana helps me sleep. I smoke weed to go to sleep. But I'm a big defender of that, the opposite of that. I don't think that's a reality for most people. I think it's something that they do because they believe it helps them, but I don't actually believe it does. I've tried before. It doesn't, at least for me personally, because if you are still staying up till 2 a.m. in the morning watching Netflix, even if you smoked weed, it's not the marijuana that's helping you fall asleep. You're just falling asleep later at night. And the reason you're tired all day is because you stayed up till 2 a.m. It's not the marijuana that's helping you fall asleep necessarily or making you sleep better. It's that your circadian rhythm is so jacked up, okay, that you can't.
And Sam, the thing is too with marijuana, it's a funny drug. Like people have different reactions to it. Like marijuana can act as a stimulant for some people, as a depressant for some people, and as a hallucinogenic for some people, right? So it's a weird drug that way, that's why people just have to be aware of what they're putting in their body and what the response is.
I'm someone who I used to smoke a decent amount of weed in high school, but I pretty much stopped after high school because I had responsibilities, and I'm not just gonna sit there and smoke marijuana when I got to get to the gym at 5 a.m. in the morning and open the gym. Like what am I doing? So I think when somebody doesn't have something to do, it's a lot more enticing to just sit there and smoke marijuana all day, right? So I think one thing you can do, I think you can smoke marijuana every day if you want to, like I just said before, but hey, are you living, like, are you working? Are you taking care of your responsibilities, or are you just?
And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing too. You got to consider other things, like especially young guys. Like, all right, how's it going to go in your relationship? You know what I mean? So this is your life now. Do you really want to be using every day? Where I've had a lot of clients where it's like, wow, I got to stop now, and I'm so used to this thing. I've been doing it for years, and I don't know if I can stop, and it might cost me my marriage. Do you really want to get there? I remember also, how do your kids look at it? Like Sam, like growing up, if you saw me drink alcohol every single night, okay, what would you have thought? Every single night, what would you have?
I wouldn't have thought anything because it would have been natural, right? So I would have continued the habit. I know a lot of people. I know.
But after you got older and you understood what alcohol is, I mean, what would you have thought of? I'm drinking every day.
If I didn't become that person, if I became someone who didn't drink every day, I think, oh, you know what? He's probably an alcoholic, right? But
it's not so much even being an alcoholic. It's doing a drug every single day. Like, I'll never forget that, this was a long time ago now. This was over 20 years ago. I was driving in a car and I was listening to the radio, and it was about marijuana and about legalization a long time ago. And so there was a guy on, talking about why it should be legalized and all this stuff, blah, blah, it's not a problem, blah, blah. And so this caller, I'll never forget this dude. He comes on, he goes, you know what? He goes, I used to think all you guys, I was a big pothead, and I used it all the time. I didn't think there was a problem with it. You know what I mean? I used every day, and I had to use every day, and I had to do it. I had to smoke pot before I did anything. If I went to the store to pick up milk, I smoked pot, I went to where I smoked pot, blah, blah. He goes, and I didn't think there was anything big with it. I'm married and I have kids. And then my kid, okay, gets into this anti-drug group at school, right? She's a great kid, anti-drug, doesn't use it. And she caught me using it. And he goes, and she hasn't talked to me for 2 weeks. And he goes, I regret the day I ever used marijuana. I feel like such a low life, and I'll just never forget that, because your life changes, and why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because someone that uses every day as a young person, every day, multiple times a day or whatever, and it's interwoven into the fabric of their life. Do you really want a drug interwoven into the fabric of your life? Really? Because down the line, it's going to be very difficult, and it does change you. Like, I've had a lot of guys that are used for 20 years daily, and their affect, okay, the way that they present when they're just listening to you, they're just so flat. They have nothing to them.
Yeah, but is that also like, I want to agree with that, but I think that's so far few in between in terms of like that situation that guy had. I think that's kind of just, I don't think that happens to majority. And for a lot of people, when you say like they're flat, that could be, a lot of people are mixing drugs here. Okay. A lot of people are mixing drugs.
What I'm saying is someone that uses multiple times a day, every day for years and years. That's what I'm saying. And so you can't escape, okay, issues with that. Okay, you can't escape permanent brain change with that.
So
okay,
what do you think the effects are? Like, for example, because I train so many people who smoke marijuana, but also happen to be on anxiety medication, antidepressants, all the above, right? So what is the potential dangers of fueling your brain with, your doctor gave you antidepressants, but you also been smoking weed since you're 20 years old, and now you're 35 and you're on antidepressants and you're smoking weed, and you take Xanax to go to sleep. What, you take Ambien to go to sleep, you take Xanax when you're, so what is the potential problems you could have overloading your brain like that? Because I know a lot of people who do all the above.
Right. So, I mean, to answer that question, right, I mean, first it would depend on how much the person's doing it. So obviously, if they're not doing the marijuana too often, then it's not really going to have too much of an effect. Nothing for them to worry about.
And
but
can we say that's true for pretty much all instances? If you're just doing it every once in a while, it's really not
right. Yeah, anything once in a while, even if it's not going to throw you. It's not going to throw your brain off. It's not going to throw you off, right? Mm-hmm. So even if you do that once a week, like, so if someone was on all those drugs and they got high once a week, like, that's really not going to do anything to them, right? To them. But if you're a regular user, now you got a couple of things that you should be concerned about, like, and this is the first thing. We don't have these little compartments in our brain where all the drugs go into. Like, Xanax goes in this compartment, stays by itself. Alcohol stays in this compartment. Marijuana stays in this compartment. Antidepressants stay in this department. We have what's called synergy. All these things come together. Okay. So, whenever this, clients talk to me about this, my first thing is, well, if you're using marijuana all the time, it's going to take away from the effects of the other drugs. So I tell them, why even take an antidepressants if you're using so much marijuana? I said, you're just running it through your liver. You're not having an effect on it. You should be honest with your doctor. So if you're using too much marijuana, you might want to consider, why am I on antidepressants? Because it's taking away from the effect. Now, if you're on Xanax and marijuana, those are two psychoactive, mood-altering drugs. Okay, an antidepressant is not. So, now you're really going to have synergy. Like, those two things together are going to come with a new high. Okay. Those two things are going to come together and create a synergistic effect, we call that. And you might really like that synergistic effect. You might like that combination of marijuana and Xanax. And then now you have a different animal that you're creating, that might be hard to stop. So, there's a couple of issues with that.
And let's just because it's about an hour in now. So
yeah, getting tired.
Yeah, I know. I always drag you in late because I got busy days. I got long days. But let's just drag it in here. Okay. So let's say someone, if you listen to this podcast and you don't smoke weed, well, then we got no advice for you. Keep doing your damn thing, right? But if you're someone who's been smoking weed for a while now, what is a good game plan for someone who wants to keep it in their life, right? They want to keep it in their life. But they want to feel better. They want to be more successful. They want to accomplish more things, right? And they haven't thought that marijuana is holding them back. And maybe it's not. Maybe they have to look at the other areas of life. But what is a good game plan for someone who wants to keep marijuana in their life, but wants to be a little bit more motivated, more successful, and get along the road that they want to be on?
The less you do of any drug, the more successful, okay, the more motivated you're going to be for other things. That's just fact. You know what I mean? There's no drug that can say, hey, that includes Adderall. like people take Adderall because, they call it a study drug. You know what I mean? Hey, I'm going to be more successful. Well, yeah, maybe it's going to help you be more focused for a while and need less sleep and all this stuff, but it's going to catch up with you. It's going to catch up with you. So even that's not good, so but the thing is, you want to evaluate, to have an honest conversation with yourself. Like, am I doing this too often and too much? Do I really need to be doing a mood altering substance this often? Okay, so I always challenge people, like, if you are self-medicating, and I determine self-medicating as using by yourself, and and any successful story aside, and of course, you used one here, okay, of a client, put that aside. Generally speaking, why? My question is why? Why would you need to do something every day, a mood altering substance, on your own? So I encourage them not to do that. I encourage them to put it where it's supposed to be socially. Put it to the weekend. Don't use Monday through Thursday on the weekday. If you're going to use Friday through Sunday, so keep it on the social road, not on the self-medication road. That's a really good place to start for someone to see, Sam, because this is a test. If you can keep it there, if you can successfully cut back and keep it there, guess what? You don't really have an issue with it. But if you fail and continue to fail to successfully cut back, you got issues going on, So that's the key.
So step one, try and gain control. Set a schedule. Try and
See
abide by that schedule.
See if you have control.
Yeah, see if you have control. And then after that, start what would be the next step that you would say? I would say, after you see if you have control, right? Say you do have control, you gain control over it. I think the next step is addressing your motivations for life. Like, what did you, if it's not the marijuana holding you back, what do you want to do?
So we talked about, I did a video on prioritizing your life, the life hierarchy, So if you're using marijuana every day, obviously it's up there, in the life hierarchy. It's like 1, 2, or 3, you know what I mean? People could argue about that, but why is it up so high? So yeah, so it's kind of funny. Why is it up so high? Anyway, it shouldn't be up that high. Like, why is it that important to you? Why is a drug that important to you? Seriously, and that's the conversation I have. Like, it shouldn't be that important to you. Like, why is it? You know what I mean? So cut back on it significantly. Keep it where it's supposed to be. Do it with your friends. You know what I mean? Do it with your friends on Saturday night. If that's what you guys do, you get together, you get high, you have a couple beers, fine.
When do you think marijuana is a good thing for somebody? When do you think it can be used?
Listen, if someone has an issue and they feel that marijuana is really helping their issue and their life improves, then I think that's a good thing.
Done. Simple like that. Simple.
Yeah.
Like that. Perfect. Yeah, this was very informational, especially, for anybody out there who really didn't understand marijuana in the first place. So Coach Tom is going to be talking a lot about drugs, alcohol, substance abuse on these podcasts. It just so happened that marijuana is coming out, available tomorrow in New Jersey legally. Yep. So we wanted to get on here. This was a last minute thing too. So this is all off the top of his head. Maybe one day we'll come back to the marijuana topic with some bullet points and really go over each one specifically, the exact ways it alters your brain, the exact doses, maybe if there's some studies out there that have shown to have some beneficial, elements to it, and the ones that are harmful to it. We can try and break, through with the dabs and the wax and the vapes and which ones are really bad and all that. So that's something I'm excited to do. And
hopefully we get some questions from this podcast. Maybe we can address some questions.
Yeah, I think we will. If anybody does want us to answer some questions, you can send them to stronggentscoaching@gmail.com. Any questions, you can send to stronggentscoaching@gmail.com. If you're interested in our coaching services, where we host a membership website with every lesson that is recorded, as well as live video coaching sessions with you guys when you're in the duration of the program, you can reach out to us at stronggentscoaching@gmail.com. Reach out to us on Instagram at stronggents_coaching or Facebook at stronggents-men's coaching, and send us a message so we can get you started on getting your life together physically, mentally, and socially, economically. That'd be great.
And how so cost effective. Guys can't get this type of expert, exposure, for the low fee per month. I'll tell you that.
No, we've made it extremely accessible because the goal really, The reason I started this was because I think men are missing this platform in their life. There's no one out there teaching them how to be physically, mentally, and socioeconomically successful in life. They kind of, at least I felt when I was growing up, that I was kind of the lone wolf. And I think men feel like they are supposed to be the lone wolf. And that's just false narrative. Back in the day, there used to be a tribe who used to help you along. It was a tribal thing. And that's what we're creating here at Strong Gents, is a tribe of men who are helping men be better men, because the world needs good, strong men. And strong men have control over the drugs they use. Done.
And strong men know, okay, when something's a problem for them and they can't do it anymore. Okay, so that's a different type of strength, and that is showing the most strength. Okay, when you recognize, wow, this is a problem for me, I can't do this anymore, and I have to put all my energies towards being strong about that.
So you can get a stronger, healthier life out of it. Done. Peace, guys.
All right, man.